Congress intended for every eligible American to have access to tax credits that would lower their health care costs, regardless of whether it was state officials or federal officials who were running the marketplace. I think that is a pretty clear intent of the congressional law. This will work its way through the legal process, and we are confident in the legal case that the Department of Justice will be making.
For those who deal in facts, there can be not a single doubt. Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act, the medical insurance coverage, boon or boondoggle, no matter what you call it, is on the skids, and the American people are the ones calling for it to be scrapped or redone. A new poll from Politico shows 45% of Americans believe the law needs to be repealed in its entirety. Another 38% admit it needs some serious work. Imagine what you're going through. Now imagine what this all means from the doctor's angle. Imagine no more. Welcome into Midpoint. The author of Optimal Living 360, Dr. Sanjay Jain, joins us today. Doctor, thank you so much for being here.
How are you doing? Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for being here. Right off the top, how difficult is Obamacare making life for you and fellow doctors? People, and everybody thinks doctors are wealthy and they're just making a fortune here, but the guys and the gals just trying to make a living.
Well, I like to pull my hair out, and luckily I have a lot of my hair, but maybe in another week it might be all pulled out. It's very frustrating. And it's very complicated because you got both sides, the Republicans, Democrats become very political, and the consumers, the doctors, the insurance companies are all caught in the middle. So it's very problematic.
The Federal Appeals Court rulings that came down yesterday, when you talk about tearing your hair out, have you really had a chance to look at it, absorb it, and then try to figure out how you're going to make it work with patients? Because now this throws another wrench into how normal doctors will deal with patients on a daily basis. I guarantee you there's people right now who are going to walk into a doctor's office and say, am I covered?
Yeah, and that's the biggest issue is not only do patients have questions, doctors and healthcare providers, they all have questions themselves. So we're getting back to square one. First of all, we had the big issue of trying to get the health coverage when we had the big blow up on healthcare.gov and trying to get on the exchange. And so now we've sort of weathered that storm, and now this thing blew up just within the last few days in terms of the subsidies. So the biggest question now is, part of the Affordable Care Act was getting subsidies for a lot of patients who could not afford to get health care. So what this new ruling has done is actually taken away subsidies, or actually ruled in the fact that these subsidies are illegal. So now what? So the patients who are actually, about 4.7 million patients have actually benefited from the subsidies. So these people are now asking, so are we going to lose our subsidies? What's next? So the problem is the open enrollment comes in November. Now they're talking about Supreme Court ruling in 2015. So what's going to happen from now until then to these patients who are sort of up in the air? And not only patients, but doctors, people who are billing these health insurance providers, trying to figure that out in terms of how are we going to fit in this new ruling that just took place yesterday.
Doctor, I will give you something of a personal note here and what I hear from doctors, because I know a lot of people in the medical community. There are patients out there who will say, come on, doctors are making a ton of money right now. They're all getting insurance. The insurance companies are keeping them busy. They've got their cars, their houses. Doctors are making a fortune right now. I hear some doctors saying that, quite frankly, this is something that they're not making a lot of money on, that they're actually, some doctors have told me that they frankly have to close some of their offices now because of Obamacare. They can't make it work. Honestly now, give us some of the reality here. Is this really putting a hardship, a living hardship on physicians?
I would say it's putting a hardship, but there's a perception out there in terms of what doctors have made and are making now. Back in the 80s, it was boom time. There wasn't as much, there's a lot more fee for service, less I would call managed care, and things have gotten more and more commoditized, with physicians actually practicing being bought out by bigger companies. Now a lot of practices are being bought out by hospitals and bigger systems. And now Wall Street has gotten into the game and are purchasing doctor practices in big groups. So really, in terms of what it was back then and what it is now, I completely agree that what it was to be a doctor many years ago has completely changed now. So really, doctors have really become sort of on the bottom of the totem pole in terms of having some control, not only of their practice, but also of their finances. So now you got the government kind of putting this big Affordable Care Act, and also the insurances companies coming in. I like to give an example. It's like going to a McDonald's, and this is what healthcare has become for doctors. Going to McDonald's, you get a Big Mac that's on the menu. Oh, it's a 250, but you actually can buy it for 30 cents. That's what it feels like for doctors when people can come into your shop, and even though you post a sign up that says, okay, the Big Mac's 250, people can walk away with the same Big Mac for 30 cents for what it was really charged for. So that's kind of what healthcare has become. And so it's become, there's there's limits on terms of the ceiling, in terms of pricing, it's become more competitive. So there is a crunch for doctors, absolutely.
I got about 90 seconds left here. In your opinion, and the opinion of those doctors that you know, is Obamacare as it exists today putting patients' lives at risk every day?
Well, I don't know if it puts lives at risk. I think the biggest issue is, I think the intent is, I see the intent in trying to get everybody healthy. And of course, we all hear of a healthy society is a prosperous society. But we also have to put things in perspective in terms of what's happening to those patients who are actually getting bumped. And I'll give you a quick example. With this new infusion of new patients coming in, a lot of the people who are maybe 2 weeks out are getting pushed out maybe 4 weeks or even 5 weeks. So access has been affected. So that could have an effect on patient care. So that still has to be answered, that whole question.
Got about 30 seconds left. I know this isn't a lot of time to do it, but what would doctors do to make it better?
Really, doctors have tried to go into organized medicine and truly try to lobby and kind of make their case. They got the American Medical Association, all these political action committees, but really, as a doctor to survive, you still had to do the bread and butter, still had to be on top of your game, still has to stay up with medical technology and medical treatments. And that's the best way to survive as a doctor, is to stay up to date and just do the best job as you can. And, the cards play out what it is, whatever hands dealt out, you have to manage that. But I think, and doctors are very adaptable, but it's not the same as it used to be.
You've answered a lot of questions, but there's a whole lot more. I certainly hope you'll agree to come back on again. I want to tell everybody that Dr. Sanjay Jain's book is Optimal Living 360, Smart Decisions, Making for a Balanced Life. Dr. Jain, again, thank you so much for being with us. Promise us you'll come back again and we'll talk more about it from the doctor's perspective.
Thank you. Sounds good. Thank you very much.
You got it. All right, Dr. Jain, thank you. The Obamacare decision, and I can tell you this from talking to a lot of medical professionals, the doctors are just as angry, and the doctors are concerned that they're still going to be able to deliver a standard of care that Americans expect. Next up, Israel.